Oh my god, it's Video Games. We are back again to talk about video games, and it is once again that time to go through my favorite games of the year here in 2025. And I've got to say, this has been a year of highs and lows, as there are a lot of games I was looking forward to, some of which have lived up to and exceeded expectations, stuff that surprised me, and stuff that maybe did not do such. But we'll get into that here at this list. I have a good list here of 15, 20 games, something like that. It could be even more by the time I'm done recording this, God only knows. But we're going to first start off kind of like we did last year with a short list of games here of stuff that I did not finish for whatever reason, whether it be maybe other stuff came out and got in the way, or just short games that I just don't have a ton to say about. So with that, let's kind of just jump right in. And first up is the return of a franchise beloved by many people, and that is Skate. Now, to be completely honest, my history with the Skate games is kind of few and far between. They're games I mostly played at other people's houses, as I did not have a PS3 or 360 at the time when the series was really in its prime. No, I was that weirdo that had Skate on the DS, and that was my primary form of playing the Skate games. I mean, I'm a huge skateboarder and skateboarding fan. I still skate to this day, but the Tony Hawk's Pro Skater series has always been my bread and butter. So Skate has never really been my favorite game in the world, as there's a bit of a learning curve to it, but it's a game I enjoy from time to time. And seeing that this was free, I was more than happy to pick it up, especially since I have a good handful of friends that were all really excited to play this. So I decided to pick it up and play it, and you know what? It's fine, it's okay. The controls are pretty good. I like the new streamlined control system. The animations look really good. So hitting lines and hitting tricks feels fantastic. The soundtrack is also really excellent. But the kind of Fortnite-ification of Skate and the kind of cleaned and corporatized version of skateboarding that they present in this game, both graphically and just the kind of sheen that's on the game, is okay. I prefer a grittier, more skateboarding aesthetic. I think Skate 2 kind of nailed it best with its low angle camera and kind of wide angle lens. It made it really look like a skate video, and you can kind of do that here. You can tweak the FOV and where your camera angle is, but it all just feels so sanitized. But it feels like a skate game. It plays well, and it's free, so just to sit there and play with my friends and skate around and have fun is perfectly fine with me. And I don't really need anything else from it, though I do look forward to EA, updating this game and really knocking it into place and hopefully really expanding upon it. So yeah, that's kind of the first game there. Skate. Don't have a ton to say about it. It's another Skate game. Maybe it's not the Skate game that most people wanted, but I think it'll be plenty serviceable, and it seems like it already kind of has been. So that's Skate. Moving on, we have a game here that'll probably shock a lot of people, as this is most likely going to end up on a lot of people's Game of the Year lists, and that is none other than Blue Prince. Now, Blue Prince is really neat. It's like a rogue-like puzzle game, and the setup here is that you are a person whose uncle has passed away, and he is going to leave you with his inheritance and his mansion under the one condition that you reach room 46 in 30 days. And the big thing here is that his mansion rearranges itself every single day. So it's a really, really neat setup of where you start this game and you're presented with 3 doors. And every time you come to a door, you are then presented with 3 completely random blueprints of what is going to be behind that door. And you have to make your way to room 46. So some doors might lead to dead ends, however they might have perks to them, like, hey, there's more gems in here, or there's more keys in here, which you will need to unlock doors and other such things. Or, hey, this blueprint is here and it's going to turn into a hallway where you have 4 different exits, and they'll lead you all to different places. Or you can just open up different rooms that have buffs or debuffs, like if you go to the weight room, you lose more steps every time you pass through it. If you go to another room, you might gain 2 steps every time you go through it. Or, of course, they might lead to puzzles and buffs that'll just kind of carry over from game to game. And the big thing here is you have a step count every day. So those steps do mean something, because at the end of each day, which is after you've used up all 40 of your steps, the mansion completely resets and you start over from scratch. With some of these puzzles and some of these things you do add permanent buffs to your character, like, hey, you've now upgraded your step count to 65 for each day, or hey, you solved this puzzle in the garage, these handful of doors are now always unlocked. So with each playthrough, you're constantly kind of getting further and further and further, and it's a really, really awesome concept that just didn't quite click with me how I wanted it to. But it's a game I really wanted to enjoy, and maybe one of these days I'll go back and get something out of it a bit more. But I was really happy to see some guys at one of the AGDQs this year run through the game and just, really show it off and see what else there is to it, and kind of talk about like the meta game that's going on within the game itself, which is a really neat concept. But I highly recommend, go check out Blueprints. Maybe check out a demo or look into some videos of it, see if it's your thing. It just didn't happen to be mine, but it seems like it's a fantastic game. All right, moving on, we have another game that's kind of surprising, as it's part of a genre that I'm not usually the biggest fan of, and that is Tainted Grail. Now, Tainted Grail is what I would call a Scrolls-like. It is like Oblivion, like Skyrim. It is an Elder Scrolls clone, passionately made by a handful of indie devs, and lovingly so. It is a fantastic little action RPG game that is kind of a really neat retelling of like Arthurian legend, with like a kind of Bloodborne mixed with H.R. Geiger paint job over top of it that makes it really visually stand out. And I kind of went into this one really hoping, based on the trailer, that the combat was maybe a little tighter, more focused, more arcadey, and unfortunately it kind of wasn't, but I still had a good time with it in the 12 to 14 hours I put into it. As you go into this world, and of course, like in all of these games, you have choices and quests that kind of matter, and of course, it's an open world action RPG like this, so you have your dungeons, you have your monsters and your loot you can collect and craft stuff, and it's very much a Elder Scrolls style game, and I think it's a pretty good one, and it's got to be even better now, as there have been 2 huge overhaul patches since I played this back when it came out. So maybe check this one out. But it's also a game I feel really bad for, because it either came out just before or just after Expedition 33 dropped, so that kind of stole its thunder, and then shortly after that the Oblivion Remaster Shadow dropped, and again I feel like it just kind of got lost in the shuffle. So if you've not heard of Tainted Grail, I definitely recommend you go back and check it out. It's pretty good, again, and that's coming from somebody who is not the biggest open world RPG kind of guy. I still had a good amount of fun with it in the 14 hours I played. So yeah, check out Tainted Grail. All right, these next 2 games are both very, very similar, and I'll kind of preface it by saying it's been a really good year for action sports games, or anything where you're going to ride something like a snowboard or a skateboard, as we got a plethora of those style of games this year, and these next 2 are perfect examples of that. First up, we have Star Overdrive. Now, the best pitch I can give you for Star Overdrive is that it is essentially Breath of the Wild, but instead of walking or riding a horse everywhere, you have a hoverboard that you ride around like a skateboard and a snowboard, and it's kind of awesome. And I say kind of awesome because it kind of has like a clear divide, in that it really feels like the developers spent all of their time making sure that traversing around in this game felt really good, because guess what? Riding around on your hoverboard and hitting these huge airs off of ramps or giant structures or these sand dunes feels really, really good. Very kinetic, nice and fast-paced. And then you kind of have the action and the combat and the puzzles that all feel like they could have just used an extra couple of months to cook. They just feel kind of underutilized, especially in the combat department, where the world feels kind of vast but kind of empty, and you'll come across these little combat scenarios and you're like, oh, okay, I wish this had a bit more oomph to it. It just kind of feels like generic action game. And the same thing definitely kind of carries over to the boss battles. I feel like maybe if they'd approached these bigger boss battles like maybe like a Shadow of the Colossus, it could have really added something to it. But aside from the combat, you do kind of have your equivalents to the shrines in this game, where you go in and you acquire new items that'll allow you to do new things, and there are obviously puzzles presented in these shrines. And again, these are fun, but again, some of them feel like they're kind of empty, they're kind of half-baked, or they just aren't as well put together as they could be. Yeah, so Star Overdrive is really like half of a good game that could really use a big patch or a big update, or even a sequel to really iterate on the solid foundation that's here, but it just needs more. So definitely, if this looks like your thing, pick this up on sale. I don't think it's worth the $35 I paid for it until maybe a big overhaul or a patch comes out. Hopefully something like that happens. But yeah, Star Overdrive, decent enough game, good idea, kind of okay execution. Now on the flip side from that, we have a little game that does the whole kind of extreme sports platforming thing very, very well, and that is none other than Sword in the Sea, coming to us from the developers of Journey, and I think the other game is like Children of the Sky. If you've played Journey, you know exactly what you're getting into here with Sword in the Sea. It is very much that kind of cozy folklore style adventure housed within kind of like a snowboarding game style mechanic. So in Sword in the Sea, you play as kind of this folklore creature known as the Wanderer, who is awoken and rides around on his sword like a snowboard. And you're kind of, surfing around this desert. And as you kind of go through and complete these little platforming sections, you kind of start to cleanse the world and realize that no, this isn't actually a desert, it's actually an ocean that has kind of been covered in like rust and soot and rock and gravel. And as you're going through and doing these different platforming sections and cleansing the world, it is, cleaning off this dirt and this grime, and it is introducing like these beautiful bioluminescent like flowers and plants and aquatic sea creatures. And along the way, it's like spoon feeding you little details of the lore of the world, of like this sort of Atlantis style civilization that seems to just have kind of gone through a fallout and just kind of become legend. You are kind of uncovering that and your story throughout the whole game. And it's a lot of fun, as you're also just collecting these little gold bits that you can then spend to kind of upgrade your trick system to do different stuff. And it's just a wonderful little cozy platformer. There's basically no combat in this game outside of a very, very simple final boss, but it is just such an excellent and beautiful little platformer. Every place you go, whether it be kind of the sandy sea, there's kind of like an ice level and a fire level, but it's gorgeous, and as you're cleansing it, it just becomes even more and more pretty. And the world is built in such a way for this kind of snowboarding, skateboarding style platforming and combat where you're just hitting tricks off of these huge ramps or skating back and forth between like a half pipe and hitting tricks and hitting switches and grinding along like these gigantic chains and such. And what really kind of ties this game together with the visuals is the sound design, which is excellent. It adds this beautiful layer of like ASMR as every different type of surface you skate across, whether it be like sand to gravel to ice to the water itself, emits this really satisfying sound of you just skating across it. And I was playing this on the PS5, and all of those sounds would just come out of the controller with a small and smooth vibration. It's a really relaxing game. That said, it is a very short game. My first playthrough was about 3.5 hours, so at about $15 to $20, I could see people being hesitant to grab this, as it's definitely pretty short. Though I definitely think it's worth your time, especially maybe at $15, as it is a really cozy, perfect, lazy Sunday afternoon adventure to go on. The perfect kind of like hangover game, I feel kind of crappy. This is like a low stakes, really satisfying, it'll just kind of massage your brain kind of game. So I highly recommend checking out Sword in the Sea. Fantastic little one that just kind of flew onto my radar as it released in late August. And it did release simultaneously on PlayStation Plus and I think Game Pass, so I was able to pick it up for free and I feel pretty good about that. But regardless, I would have happily paid the $15 to play it as well, as I really enjoyed Journey and Children of the Sky in the past, so I was just happy to play another game from the same developer. So yeah, that's Sword in the Sea. Alright, I was debating on whether I was going to talk about this one, but I've had a bit of fun with this game, so I figure I'll give it a mention. Sonic Rumble. Now, this is a little free-to-play, let's just call it like we see it. It is a Fall Guys clone with a Sonic paint job, but that's not necessarily a bad thing, as the kind of obstacle course driven play style of Fall Guys actually lends itself quite well to the Sonic universe, and it kind of does a lot of things that I enjoyed about Sonic Dream Team, which came out on Apple Arcade a handful of years ago. But This is a Fall Guys clone. It is a battle royale where you're going to be going through various, like 3 different obstacle courses and try to qualify to not get knocked out, to make it to the finals and earn coins to unlock skins and a bunch of other stuff. It's a mindless little fun platformer battle royale, and I just kind of sat down to play it on a whim and actually ended up having quite a bit of fun with it and played about 2 to 3 hours in that one sitting and was rather shocked, as kind of the battle royale thing's not necessarily my favorite kind of genre, but I was like, yeah, you know what? This looks relatively okay, let's give it a shot, and yeah, it's actually pretty fun. So you have your different events, so you have stuff like Ring Survival Dash, where you're just trying to make it through these giant obstacle courses as fast as possible. You kind of have these like ring battles where you have a kind of smaller arena where you're just trying to collect as many rings as possible, more than the other players, and you have certain attacks and attributes that'll let you steal rings from other players at certain points or attack other players to slow them down. There are kind of like team games where it's like, hey, get your team's color balls into these holes to gain more rings. The more balls that you actually get into the holes, the more rings you actually get. And of course, all of this stuff is themed around Sonic. So you have like a city escape level, you have like a seaside runner level, you have like a casino night style level, and like a sweet mountain. So, you know, you get this nice cavalcade of Sonic backdrops and a ton of different Sonic characters, and I think it makes for, yeah, a fun 3D Sonic game. But then, of course, you have like 32 other people in these maps to kind of clutter it and crowd it that you've got to try and defeat and beat. It's a good, harmless time. Obviously, with this being a free-to-play game, it kind of runs into that territory of like, hey, predatory microtransactions of you can go in and buy skins, or you can buy the season pass, or you can buy this upgrade and X, Y, and Z. And honestly, I felt no need to spend any money in this game. As a matter of fact, you earn tons of rings pretty quickly, and all of that can be spent at the shop for free. There's dailies and weekly challenges and such like that you can claim that will give you more skins and more coins and more abilities and emotes and all that jazz. And, you know, of the characters I wanted to get, within 2 hours of playing, I had all of them. I had Rouge, I had Metal Sonic, I had Knuckles, I had Silver. So there's a ton of stuff here, and they are just giving it out to you. It's good fun. It's good little mindless kind of platformer battle royale fun. Something I didn't quite expect to enjoy, but hey, you know what? It's good. I would recommend, you know, giving it a shot if you got a little bit of time to kill. It's good, harmless fun. Alright, moving up into our middle tier of games here. This is probably where the bulk of the discussion is going to be had. Before we get into my top 5, we're going to start off with a wonderful little remaster from Night Dive, lords and saviors of old FPS games. And this year they've brought us quite a handful, but the one I want to talk about in particular is their Heretic and Hexen remasters, which are both games that I have very little experience with over the years, but obviously being a huge fan of Doom and the original Doom games, knowing that both Heretic and Hexen were built on the same engine and were overseen by John Romero, and were done by Raven Software, you know, you can't go wrong. I was like, you know what, I want to give these games a try, and truthfully, I'd really only played a little bit of Heretic before picking this up, and kind of did the same thing here. The main one I want to focus on here is Hexen itself. Kind of before I get into that, I do want to say that Night Dive has come in here and obviously remastered this game, but also made a handful of changes. Like they've kind of retweaked and rebalanced the game to make it more kind of faster, a bit quippier, I guess more Doom-esque in a way. And I've seen some people complain about that. I, for one, again, have no frame of reference for that, so I thought it was fine. But I have also really enjoyed some of the extra quality of life stuff and, you know, the extra mile that Night Dive goes with these remasters, as they've taken, like, old sprites and, like, beta content and cleaned it up and put it into the game, and I think they've cleaned up some of the, like, cutscenes that were in this game, what few there were. But what really sold me on Hexen is that they've included a better map, they've included markers on the map, and they've given each character a few other moves in their arsenal, which is really, really great, because Hexen is one of those games I've heard about for, you know, a number of years, and over the years, it's kind of back and forth on people's opinions. A lot of people who go, oh, it's a really awesome, kind of inventive, semi-open world adventure, you know, like magical fantasy game. And then other people who are like, yeah, it's just a gigantic annoying switch hunt where you just get lost in all of these different realms and these different maps, and it's kind of a pain in the butt. And if I'm going to be completely honest, it was the latter opinions that kept me away from it until now. And playing through it, I completely understand why people have that opinion of the game, because it is a giant, almost unbroken switch hunt from beginning to end. And if it were not for the quality of life changes made in this version, I absolutely would not have enjoyed this game. Because even with some of these quality of life changes, for the biggest one being the markers on the map, so they will put X's of like, hey, this is where an important item is going to be, or hey, there's at least an important item in this realm, you probably need to go back in there and find it. And even with all those markers, I still found myself wandering around for 30-40 minutes on occasion, trying to track down this one minute switch that was just hidden a little too well for me to find. But overall, I think I enjoyed Hexen. I like the aesthetic. I love the kind of dark fantasy aesthetic of this game. I loved kind of getting lost in these levels that were all kind of brilliantly done. Like there's kind of like dark misty swamps, and then you kind of have like some generic dark caverns, but then you also have like these giant ancient cathedrals with stained glass windows that are very colorful and really add a sense of like high fantasy to this world. The combat here is, you know, again, it's very Doom inspired, but does its own thing that makes it quite fun. I think I played as the cleric on this playthrough, and the big reason I wanted to do that is because Night Dive has gone in and given them a parry. So the shield they carry, you can parry certain attacks with it, which will stun enemies and allow you to one-hit them, which came in super handy for a handful of enemies throughout this and actually made the combat really fun. I enjoyed my experience with this game, though I will say, with it being this kind of first outing for a very ambitious project of sort of doing an open world, as you have different kind of hubs. You have a main hub, which will spit you into various different hubs throughout the game that are also then made up of smaller, different like trials and different areas that kind of string together to be sort of several unbroken big sections. So yeah, well, I think that's like a neat idea. It's a little overambitious here, as I think this game does linger on a little too long. I think they probably could have cut the last area entirely, as by the time I got there, I was like, all right, I'm like 6 to 8 hours into this, and I think I'm ready for this to wrap up. So it has legs, but maybe not the longest of legs. It is no Doom or Doom 2, but it is still a very interesting game to kind of go back and look on, kind of see how stuff like this kind of started. But yes, Hexen. Very interesting. I was kind of glad to get my hands on it and go through it after hearing about it for so many years and kind of understand the frustration, but also understand the fun that comes along with it. Next up, we're going to get into the kind of new retro game territory of this list, which is kind of like a dangerous fine line to ride there, because with a lot of quote-unquote new retro games, you can kind of end up with a game that just has a somewhat pixelated aesthetic that ends up being what I like to call kind of retro slop. And you kind of know exactly what I mean when I say retro slop, is a game that just takes that aesthetic and then doesn't do anything original or doesn't do anything like fun or interesting with it. I like a good retro-inspired game that kind of sticks to those traditional formulas of retro games, but also expands upon them just enough to make them really interesting. And that's why we have stuff in here like Earthion, which comes to us from Yuzo Koshiro and Makoto Wada, who are both Sega veterans. Yuzo Koshiro creating some of the greatest Sega soundtracks from the 16-bit era, and what they've given us here is an incredible, faithful to the Genesis shoot 'em up. And, you know, while it doesn't necessarily bring anything new or inventive to the genre, what it does really well. I mean, the shooting and the movement are tight, they feel great. Of course, you have your different shot power-ups. I, for one, found the V-Fire my go-to weapon throughout this game, as its spread shot was very useful throughout the whole thing. And then kind of my secondary was this kind of homing laser attack, which was very powerful, but I really kind of only reserved it for bosses. So you do have different shot types to kind of keep things varied up. Of course, in true shoot-'em-up fashion, all of these shot types can be upgraded a handful of times. You can also upgrade your shields, which just kind of act as extra hit points. Alright, I did say it doesn't bring anything new to the table, but there are a couple of different power-ups that'll kind of do some interesting stuff. One in particular is like a canister that you will take in place of a secondary shot type, as you can hold 2 shot types. And if you keep that till the end of the level, you'll be able to use that for some upgrades. So you can like upgrade your max shot and your max shields, or you can upgrade to an extra player, or you can upgrade a slot and just have a permanent special weapon. So it does a little something, but for the most part, it is a meat and potatoes 16-bit shooter. Obviously, the graphics and the music in this game are superb. I mean, they have knocked it out of the park here. Levels really stand out. I mean, you kind of have, there's kind of this gigantic space battle going on in the background, then you kind of have your second level, which looks pretty good, and then you get to the boss fight, and it's just this beautiful sunset on this ocean, and it looks fantastic. I was sitting there, I was like, wow, this looks really good. Oh shoot, I gotta kill this monster. Of course, we kind of have our typical, I would say it's a trope for the shoot 'em up genre to kind of have our H.R. Geiger alien-esque looking level, and here this one is just as gross and squishy and disgusting and awesome as all of the rest. And actually, it's really cool. It starts out with like this creepy creature chasing you, and then you kind of get to just shoot through the rest of it. And of course, the boss lives up to the crazy, awesome, horrifying nature of the level. The bosses are also something to be seen. They are just huge, massive, beautiful sprites that take up half the screen, and in some cases are multi-screen sprites. It's really, really awesome. It's not to be missed. And while I'm on the topic of graphics, this thing definitely either would have pushed the Genesis's graphics, or would maybe even does stuff that wasn't quite possible on the Genesis, as there's a couple moments where there's like some faux 3D stuff thrown in there, but there's also a ton of parallax scrolling and line scrolling, lining the backgrounds and the different levels of this to really just give it that beautiful 16-bit powerhouse shooter that it is. Of course, I've got to talk about the music. The music is really, really good here. Yuzo Koshiro did an excellent job, although I will admit I was kind of disappointed that the music and the sound effects are kind of tied together. So at some point I was like, man, this song rips. I would like to turn down the sound effects so I can hear more of the music. I went into the options and nope, both the music and the sound effects can only be turned down together. They cannot be turned down separately, which is kind of a shame, but again, at least there's a music player in there so you can go back and listen to those sick jams. I will admit it's a little short. My last playthrough here was about 40 minutes, but it does have a couple of different, higher difficulty modes. So for crazy shoot 'em up fans out there that want to go through the whole game in one CC it, that is absolutely an option for you. You will probably get a whole lot more time out of it, but just be warned, it is about, an 8-level game. It's kind of short. It's going for about $20, which again, I feel is maybe a little steep. This probably should have been about $15 to $10 if you ask me. I did wait and pick it up on sale for $15, but I don't regret that. I think this is an excellent shoot 'em up. It really feels like somebody was moving a couch or something over at Sega headquarters and found an old cart of an unreleased game and said, oh snap, we should probably put this out. This is awesome. So go check out Earthion. It's a really, really good shoot 'em up that calls back to the excellent days of the Genesis. But to kind of keep with the retro games, here we have a kind of new inspired retro game in the form of Neon Inferno. And now Neon Inferno is best described as Contra meets Wild Guns. It's this kind of incredible side-scrolling shoot 'em up and kind of gallery shooter mishmash that really feels like something Natsume would have cranked out in the 16-bit era on the Super Nintendo, and I absolutely loved every single second of this. In this game, you play as one of two assassins working for the mob in, this cyberpunk dystopian future, which it looks just as awesome as you'd expect. All of the backgrounds are so dense and full of crazy and wonderful things, and then of course they get filled with these enemies because you have the ability to shoot into the background like wild guns, which is super cool. So you have to kind of keep track of what is in the foreground with you and what is in the background, and kind of have to switch between the two and kind of keep enemies at bay. It's a really, really awesome system. You also have this sword that'll deflect certain bullets back at other enemies, and then you have bullet time attached to that, where if you hold down the button, you can then aim those bullets to shoot back in a certain direction to take out enemies that might be behind you or that you're not facing and ready to take out. It's a really, really awesome new Super Nintendo style game, and again, it really takes from Contra and Wild Guns and then just adds more and interesting, unique features to it. The music is also really excellent. Very, very Blade Runner. There are certain parts of this game that just sound like the very sparse, just synth-heavy, Vangelis Blade Runner soundtrack. Absolutely love that. It adds some real character to it. Again, you have these gigantic bosses that will kind of weave in and out of the background and have different phases in the foreground and background that just make for an awesome experience. I have not beat this game as of yet. I'm about like 2.5 hours in. I think there might be 1 or 2 levels left. So again, not the longest game out there, but I highly recommend checking out Neon Inferno. It has some crazy arcade modes in there for if you, again, want to 1cc the game. It has 2-player mode in there if you want to bring a friend along. You can play it solo. It's great, probably my favorite like new retro game of the year, but yeah, check out Neon Inferno. Next up is a game that actually might shock a handful of people, as this is a follow-up to what was easily my favorite game of 2020, and what has become one of my favorite games of all time. The follow-up I'm talking about is none other than Doom: The Dark Ages. Now, let me get this straight. Doom: The Dark Ages is by no means a bad game. As a matter of fact, I think it's pretty good. That said, I don't think it's a great game. And I think that more or less comes down to my personal preferences. I absolutely loved Doom Eternal, the highs and the acrobatics and just the absolute adrenaline-fueled combat that was Doom Eternal is just not what we got from Doom: The Dark Ages. And even though I knew that going in, because Hugo Martin and id were very adamant about saying like, hey, this is going to be a different experience, it's going to be more grounded, the combat is going to be more in line with like the classic Doom series, and despite that warning, I was still kind of let down by the overall experience. But there are a handful of positives to talk about, so let's kind of get into a bit more of the good stuff before I get into more of the nitty-gritty and my gripes with the game. First and foremost, this game is extremely well optimized. I mean, like, perfectly optimized. Loading is almost non-existent. It takes like 2 seconds to load, and most of the time, the game was waiting on me because I hadn't realized it had already loaded so fast. I was like, oh shit, alright, it's just waiting for me to press start. Okay, we're ready. The game runs extremely well. Like, I never ran into any slowdown, any hitches, any glitches. I don't know, the game just ran beautifully on my end, and I never had any problems with it. I love the kind of Quake-ish style, heavy metal, Dark Ages aesthetic they've added to this game. I think it fits the series really well. I think the Doomslayer looks awesome. Even the redesigns to all the monsters look really fantastic. I love the kind of Gollum-esque look to the imps. They got this like skinny, scraggly hair. The Revenants now have like kind of like Grim Reaper look to them, which is supremely cool. And even the Cacodemons like have like all these extra tentacles and look a lot like the Octobrains from Duke Nukem, which I think is kind of funny. Levels also look pretty good, although I will admit there's a portion of them that all start to blend together, though it is definitely made up for it in the back half as more visually interesting stuff kind of comes to the forefront. But speaking of the levels, the first 5 or 6 are your more typical Doom linear style affair, and then you kind of get into the bigger, more open world style maps, which I think for the most part are okay, though I will admit there are definitely times where they feel kind of empty. You know, you kind of have your big battles placed around the map, but I feel like in between those, there's not a whole lot to do. Like, I mean, you can treasure hunt, and you know, treasure hunting's cool and all, but it's really only there for like upgrades and such. I feel like they maybe really should have put in a few more key points in between these bigger battles that really kind of lent themselves to like some extra spectacle in these maps. Yeah, some of them just feel kind of empty, and like I said, having a bunch of these bigger, more open world levels back to back, they all kind of start to blend together until you get to some of the really good stuff in the later half. My 2 favorite levels, as a matter of fact, happen back to back. You have like this awesome level where it kind of takes place on the shoreline, where it's just full of these gigantic shipwreckages that then become the battle arenas and lend themselves to some really, really fun and visually interesting fights. Easily my favorite level in the game. And then at the end of this level, you get swallowed by this gigantic Cthulhu monster and then fight your way out of that monster as the next level. You're literally in there tearing its insides out as a whole big gigantic level. It's super fucking cool. And that's the kind of shit I absolutely loved in this game. It definitely does a good job in the back half, kind of picking up the slack in the middle. That said, I think my gripes start with a handful of some of these levels. In particularly, the dragon levels and the mech levels, as both of these are, I hate to say it, but they're bad. They're not good. The dragon levels are very disappointing. You're riding around on your dragon, and then you kind of have this little mini game where you sit in place and then dodge and parry to the left or right as you quickly destroy whatever you're dodging and parrying. Then you get off, do some regular Doom shit, get back on your dragon, rinse and repeat. It's really boring. And then we have the kind of mech levels, which are really slow and lumbering and just kind of feel like a crappy 3D version of like a Mike Tyson's Punch-Out level or something. I don't know. I just never liked any of these. Both the dragon and the mech levels were ones that I avoided when I went back to replay this game. And then even little stuff in these levels, like the first level ends with a turret section like it's 2008, and all these years later, yeah, turret sections still aren't that fun. It's really an odd choice. I get that they are probably trying to, vary up the gameplay here in this game, as it is quite a long game, about like 20 to 25 hours, and there's a good handful of levels. I can respect them trying to do something different to really try and keep the gameplay fresh instead of just the same thing from every level to every level, but it just doesn't work here, and it feels like maybe these could have been fleshed out more. Of course, we have the combat. And, I can't even say the combat is bad in this game. It has a decent flow to it once you kind of get into all the different mechanics and have your different weapons and such. Kind of like how Doom Eternal really comes together once you've unlocked all of the different skills and weapons. And here, it kind of hits that flow state, but it just doesn't quite have that oomph to it all. I think the big thing here is the shield, but I actually kind of like the shield. For the most part, I actually really enjoy the shield. The shield dash is a really cool mechanic, as you can kind of like lock onto an enemy halfway across a map and dash right over to it and obliterate it into pieces. And once upgraded, you can actually do that to larger groups of enemies. And then even like the shield frisbee was really awesome, as you can kind of throw that across the field and to a big old group of enemies while you're taking care of something else, and they'll just get obliterated. It's really awesome, especially once upgraded, and it can also like take out armor and such. So I think those two mechanics work really well. However, I think the parry is kind of meh. It just doesn't really feel like it has a whole lot of oomph to it, and just kind of left me wanting more. It just doesn't feel as good as like other games where they work in the, a really satisfying parry that really feels good when you're pulling it off. Gone are some of the movement tech from Doom Eternal. One thing that definitely kind of bothered me was like, they got rid of the double jump and the dash. I know that they were going for a more grounded combat experience, so take out the double jump and the dash, but I thought that was really fun movement mechanic that could be worked really well into, play styles. And it's especially strange to not see the dash in this game, as there are a lot of enemies, like the Mancubus especially, where when you're fighting it, it spits out all of these different waves of fireballs, and it would have been really neat to be able to dash between the different waves to get to the spot you need to parry to, really do the big damage. And I always love the double jump for, being able to jump over an enemy's head, shoot downwards mid-air, turn around mid-air, land, and shoot it in the back. That was always really cool, and the dash kind of aided in doing that as well. But, whatever, what's here is fine, but the combat definitely feels a bit more sluggish compared to Eternal, especially on my first playthrough where a bit of user error crept in. The game defaults you to always run turned off, which is really stupid. Go into the settings immediately before you even play this game and turn always run on. Yeah, it just makes the combat flow a whole lot better. That said, yeah, there's still just something missing here. Speaking of impact, I definitely want to bring up glory kills. Glory kills are still kind of here, and I was always on the side of the people that really loved the glory kills in Doom Eternal. They were very fast, they were extremely well animated, and they were really punchy and just had that oomph to them that just like finishing off a demon felt super great. Here, they still kind of exist, but they just have absolutely no punch or impact to them at all. They feel so lifeless. And it's such a shame, because I think they worked really well in Doom Eternal. Kind of in its place, though, you have a melee attack. And I think you get up to like 4 charges for your melee attack, which is cool, and you can kind of string them together to do like a big combo with them. But when you're comboing into these enemies, and by the end of your 4-hit combo, they're still standing, it definitely doesn't have that oomph or impact to it that like Doom Eternal has. Because I knew when I was hitting an enemy with a glory kill, it was for sure going to be dead when I was done with it. Whereas in Doom the Dark Ages, if I'm hitting an enemy with my combo, there's no guarantee it's going to die. And it always just made you feel weaker, or just like, okay, I just hit it with this awesome combo and now I still have to pump bullets into it. Weapons in this game, for the most part, are pretty good. I mean, your shotgun and your super shotgun are fantastic as ever. It's a Doom game, you're at least guaranteed that. I like the kind of ball and chain weapon, and I like the nail gun, but I think this game kind of loses some luster by having 2 types of each gun type. So, for example, you have 2 plasma guns, you have the 2 shotguns, you have 2 like heavy cannons, and you have 2 skull crusher machine gun like things. I think I would have rather them hone in one of each of these types and then added in a couple more weapons, like maybe introducing the ballista back in here or something. Because I think that would have been a lot better, as it just feels kind of pointless to have 2 different plasma guns and 2 different skull crushers, and they feel very similar. But that's kind of my main gripes with Doom the Dark Ages. And like I said, these are more personal gripes than anything. It's just my opinion. If you've really enjoyed this game, hey, that's good for you. I also enjoyed this game. Like I said, I don't dislike it. I think it's pretty good, and I've had fun going back and playing it, and thankfully it is out here patching this game pretty regularly, you know, fixing things up, debuffing enemies, buffing weapons, debuffing weapons, making changes to make this an even better game. And I respect the hell out of id for going into each game in this new Doom trilogy and making it its own thing. They all play, you know, marginally different from each other, to a degree where you're kind of going to get a unique individual experience with each game, and I can respect that. You know, just because this isn't a follow-up to Doom Eternal in the way I wanted it to be, doesn't mean that it's not a good game at its core, because at its core, it's still a good Doom experience. And I think it's a game worth checking out. However, I would definitely catch it on a sale, and if you were a big fan of Doom Eternal like me, just know going in that it's not Doom Eternal. But like I said, each game in this new Doom trilogy is its own kind of unique thing, and I think this still deserves a place in this trilogy as a good game, just not an amazing one. So yeah, that's Doom the Dark Ages. Moving right along, we have what was probably my biggest disappointment of the year, and much like Doom the Dark Ages, it's also a new entry in a long-standing series that I absolutely adore, and that's none other than Silent Hill F. Now again, Silent Hill F is not necessarily a bad game, it's a game that just didn't click with me when everything was said and done. But I also have to say that there was still a lot I liked about this game. Actually, there's a whole bunch I really liked about this game, but there are definitely some things in here that really just kind of soured my overall experience. And it's a real shame, as aside from the Silent Hill 2 remake, of all of the games that were announced in that Silent Hill transmission a couple years ago, this was the one I was most looking forward to after Silent Hill 2, as it was a brand new Silent Hill game completely developed in Japan, which is the first for the series since, Silent Hill 4 The Room? So it's nice to see it go back to Japan. And Ryukishi07 was slated to write for the game, and I enjoy their work on When They Cry and Higurashi, so I was really excited to see where this game was gonna go. And for the most part, I enjoyed it. Let's just kind of get right into the things I really liked about this game. First off, there's the visuals. This game looks fantastic. I love the setting here. I think it's Abisagaoka, Japan. I probably just butchered that name, but it's, a mountainside kind of rural town set in 1960 Japan. I know a lot of people were pissed off that it wasn't set in the town of Silent Hill, but also the map and town of Silent Hill has changed in almost every single Silent Hill game, so why does it matter if we're really completely changing locations? Especially when this game really does kind of nail the vibe and the atmosphere of Silent Hill. So that didn't bother me at all, and I quite liked it. I think the town looks gorgeous. I think the kind of flower motif that's going on in Silent Hill F, that kind of, as the game goes on, gets more like body horror-esque and goopy and disgusting, works really well. It kind of replaces the rust and decay and darkness of the original games. Although I will admit, I wish they had maybe brought in some of the crippling darkness and, horrifying decay back into some of these levels. I think that would have really added to the experience a bit more, but what's here is still really good. The monsters, the enemies in this game look fantastic. I think they're the best enemy designs we've seen in a Silent Hill game since probably Silent Hill 3. Some standouts for me are the monster made of doll parts that's really creepy, and then there's this mid-boss that's it kind of reminds me of the Abstract Daddy, where it's two figures kind of on top of each other, but it's like a woman with all of these gigantic pregnant bellies and floppy boobs, and it's just horribly disgusting, and this thing births monsters in the middle of fights. It's really, really disgusting and horrifying, and made for a really good enemy design. I think there are some pretty strong enemy designs in this game. A sound, Akira Yamaoka comes back to do the music, and as usual, he does a fantastic job. He kind of ditches his more digital sound of the earlier Silent Hill games and goes for a more traditional kind of Asian Japanese style to it. There's a lot of bamboo flutes and stringed instruments in here, but they all sound very horrifying. And when he gets his chance to do his more traditional Akira Yamaoka piece. They all sound fantastic. Let's talk about the story, because I think this is personally the best thing about this game. Ryukishi07 knocked it out of the park. You play as Hinako, who is a girl who kind of comes from a broken home where her abusive father, tries to, abuse her mother, and her sister. And while her mom, does her best to kind of keep the two children out of harm's way, she's not always able to do that. And at the end of the day, she's still there kind of enabling his behavior and keeping this cycle of abuse going. So Hinako does not like to spend time at home, especially because her parents kind of frown upon her and compare her to her more perfect sister. So she really tries to find more solace in her friends, but it also seems like maybe her friends aren't the greatest people, or aren't the people they seem to be, and that's kind of where the story goes. And the story was really fantastic. Some of the themes and the stuff that it explores and the places it goes were very interesting, and every single play session, that was the thing that just kept reeling me in. I was on the edge of my seat to find out what was going to happen next, and there is some crazy stuff in this game. I mean, there is some very out of left field stuff for the Silent Hill series that happens in this game about halfway through. Some very anime-ass bullshit happens that I would have never, ever expected from a Silent Hill game, and I think it, as much of a juxtaposition it is to the rest of the series, kind of more grounded realism, which is an insane thing to say about Silent Hill, but I think this kind of juxtaposition works really well in this game and takes it to some really interesting places, and this sequence also lends itself to one of the more shocking and horrifying parts of the game. So yeah, I think the story is excellent, but where the game unfortunately falls apart for me is the combat. I love just about everything in this game except for the combat, which I don't want to call it Souls-like combat, because that's such a cop-out, it's such a passé phrase at this point, but it feels very rooted in that style of combat that unfortunately I'm going to kind of compare it to that, as you have a stamina meter and a dodge and a parry and an attack. And I don't necessarily hate all of these things, but I just don't think it works well in this game, especially because the combat itself feels kind of unresponsive and sluggish. There is a noticeable wind-up between pressing any of your attack buttons. There's a slight delay between you dodging. And all of that really starts to fall apart because the game just doesn't feel responsive. And I think the worst offender here is the stamina meter. And it wouldn't be so bad if the three main things you did in every combat scenario did not drain your stamina bar so quickly. And those three things are attacking, dodging, and running. So here's a couple of scenarios for you. 1. You have a 3-hit combo, you go in and attack the enemy 3 times. You're completely out of stamina, you can't dodge out of harm's way. Okay, you go in and you attack twice and then dodge out of harm's way. Well, the enemies in this game are kind of fast and pretty aggressive. If they have launched into one of their combos, you're going to get hit. God forbid you run out of stamina mid-run, because Hinako's gonna stop dead in her tracks, pant for 2 seconds so she can catch her breath and regain her stamina before she can move again, and you're going to get hit. It's a real pain in the ass because of the stupid stamina bar that just, I wish was not there. If they had gotten rid of this, I think it could have been slightly better. Add to that weapons that break and enemies that repopulate pretty frequently. So not only do you have weapons that break, you do get repair kits, and you can hold multiple weapons, but if you're in an area for long enough, more than 2 minutes, the enemies are going to repop, and you're going to have to fight them again and waste more of your weapons. So why don't you just shoot them? Well, you don't get any guns in this game. So unlike the Silent Hill 2 remake, which I think had kind of mid-combat, I actually really appreciate it now because it doesn't have the stamina bar, and you also got ranged weapons. But here, it's all melee all the time. And about halfway through the game, that certain something happens, and it does aid you a bit more in your combat, especially as you go further through, but that's only in the other world sections of the game. In still the standard regular world sections of the game, you're stuck with the breakable weapons. And this combat system is just not geared towards fighting multiple enemies at once. It's a real struggle with that, and I would say about halfway point onwards, you're more often than not thrown into scenarios where you're fighting more than one enemy at once, and it just becomes a hassle. Adding to that a not so stellar camera that once backed against a wall or close enough to a wall or an object, starts to zoom more in on Hinako's back and obscure what's in front of you, attacking you even further. An FOV slider would have been a really nice addition here, and unfortunately you just don't get one. Also, maybe it was just unfortunate on my end, but I had a couple of glitches, like the fog didn't load in sometimes, some textures didn't load in a couple times. I had a weird glitch where the sound completely stopped working and I had to get to a save point and restart the game. I don't know, maybe that's just bad luck on my part, but I'm running a computer with a 4070 in it, so I don't really think that should be happening too much. So, I really did not enjoy the combat. It really just kind of brought down the overall experience for me, which is a real shame because I was enjoying everything else about it. When the game got to be a Silent Hill game, when I was, running around these different areas, finding keys, solving puzzles, searching through things, I thought the game was really good. But it just got bogged down by combat that just isn't my thing. To the people out there who really enjoyed learning this combat and getting really good at it and adapting to it, more power to you. I'm happy you enjoyed it, but it just unfortunately brought the experience down for me to the point that once I finished the game, I had no desire to go back and play the New Game Plus mode where more of the story is dealt to you. And that's a real shame because I really like the story, but instead I was like, I'm just going to look up the extra story bits and the rest of the endings to see what I missed. And again, while I think the story is really good, and I think the Silent Hill elements are really good, and the characters, and the story, and the enemies, I just can't get into the combat, but I ended up making it through the game. Yeah, like I said, I enjoyed a whole lot about this game, and I would honestly recommend this game because maybe it's just not my cup of tea with the combat. I'm really happy to see that this game has sold well. I'm glad that a lot of people are really enjoying this game. Again, just because I don't like the combat doesn't mean I don't like the game as a whole. I think there's a lot of really good elements here. And I'm happy to see that, because this game has sold so well, the Silent Hill series is probably going to continue. And Konami's kind of come out and said that, hey, we're not exactly married to the idea of keeping, the Silent Hill F formula going. We kind of want to experiment with Silent Hill and take it different places. And I'm all for that. I was all for this game doing different things. Just unfortunately, some of those different things just didn't work out the way I was hoping they would. And it just didn't land for me. So that's Silent Hill F. It is a good game that just didn't work for me. So yeah, let's just kind of move on to the next one. All right, next up is yet another movement style shooter that we're going to talk about here. Come on, y'all know my love for Doom. I love playing these different types of games. They're all really fun for me. They just itch my brain in just the right ways. And this one is no exception. And that is Void Breaker. Now this comes to us from a sole developer. And what kind of spins this one on its head is that it does a lot of unique and interesting things. So first and foremost, this is a first-person roguelike. And if I'm being completely honest, roguelike is not exactly a genre I enjoy. Typically when I see that tag on something I'm interested in, I go, ooh, nah, this is not for me. But I decided to give this game a chance, and I'm really glad I did because it is fantastic. And what really solidifies this game as a great first-person shooter is simply the movement. The movement in this game is so satisfying, it's so refined, it just lends itself to some really excellent and kind of frantic battles throughout this whole thing. In Void Breaker, you kind of wake up in the simulation run by this kind of horrible company, and you are basically told, hey, you have an endless amount of tries to try and make it out of this simulation. You have to get through these 3 zones, which are all made up of different little areas and bosses, and you have to do it in one life. And it's not an easy task. This is a difficult game. And like I said, the movement and the shooting here is fantastic. You have slides, you have dashes, air dashes, you have double jumps, and you only have 1 gun. That's kind of a downside to this one. I wish I could carry at least 2 guns, but it does make up for it with a kind of neat mix of like Half-Life 2 and Portal design. And that kind of comes in the form of your tether, which is an ability for you to pick up all of these different items scattered all over these giant arenas and being able to throw them back at enemies for damage, and it'll stun them and stagger them and bring their shields down. And when they are weakened, they will produce more health and ammo for you, so it really pays to be very quick on your feet, to be able to grab stuff and throw stuff across the arena, to stagger an enemy, shoot at it from far away, then kind of try and get in close to get the health and get back out. And while you're doing all of this, anytime you throw an explosive near any sort of structure in this game, it just comes tumbling down in a very Half-Life 2 kind of way, and it's really, really satisfying, all the destructible kind of environments in in this game. Of course, it's not just all bullets and battles. You have your different upgrade systems throughout, so after completing each little area, you will be given various combat upgrades. And this is again kind of where this game shakes things up. You have your very typical combat upgrades of like, oh, your grenade is now going to do, 15% more damage, or hey, now you have a bigger ammo capacity for each gun. But then you also get stuff like, hey, your shots are now corrosive and will do corrosive damage. Or when you slide, it leaves behind a trail of electricity that enemies can run into and it will stun them and hurt them. And then you get even more unique and crazy stuff that really elevates this game. And it's stuff like, hey, now every shot fires off a barrage of missiles. However, the damage and the amount of missiles you have is increased by how much you turn up your motion blur setting. Or like, hey, now here's this upgrade where it will give you more ammo, but it is completely tied to how low the resolution is of the internal graphics. So you can have both the motion blur and the internal resolution graphics, basically one all the way up and one all the way down, and it's very hard to discern what is going on, but you are absolutely slaughtering fools. I mean, it's crazy the awesome amount of different upgrades and such that they have in here. Another really cool one is like every time you pull the trigger, bullets no longer fire from the gun, they instead rain down from the sky in a barrage of bullets. Stuff like that just makes this game really, really fun. Obviously, with this being a roguelike, you kind of have your different permanent unlocks that you'll get throughout the game. You have credits, which you will lose at the end of every run, but those are things you can really only spend on upgrades in the run. And then you kind of have your Voidium currency, which is what you use to buy your permanent upgrades of like, hey, you're going to increase your health by 10%, by 20%. Guns are now going to do X amount more damage. Or at the end of every area you've cleared, you now get 10% more health back, 15% more health back. And just various stuff like that. And then obviously along the way, as you start to unlock more zones and more areas, you get access to more guns, and you can kind of figure out which combination works best for you. So it does have a lot of good roguelike elements in there, and it just doesn't get too tiring. I also really like the design of this game. This is kind of where I feel the Portal influence kind of comes in, especially with the kind of like omniscient voice that's speaking to you over the intercoms as you're kind of going through these different areas. And for as much as I'm not a big roguelike kind of guy, I just couldn't put it down. I couldn't stop playing it because the movement was just so refined and the shooting felt really good. Voidbreaker is a hell of a first-person shooter. If you really like movement shooters like I do, this is one to check out. It's completely made by a sole developer. As of right now, there are only 3 areas in the game, but I've put 10 plus hours into this game and have only beaten the first area once and have yet to make it through the second area, so I can see this one lasting quite a bit of time. And this game is still technically in like early access. The dev is still working on it and will probably be adding more and more features. Pick it up. It's a really, really good game. Fantastic shooter. Definitely one that was overlooked this year, and obviously the barrage of a bajillion games that come out every year. But yes, that is Voidbreaker. Next up, we have a game that I actually did not expect to play this year. I actually had no idea it was coming out until it was basically out. And that is the remake of Yooka-Laylee, kind of clunkily titled Yooka Replayee. Now, I must admit that this is a game I have not played before. I did not play the original when it came out. I do remember it coming out and being met with mostly kind of middling reviews, as that it just didn't quite live up to the Banjo-Kazooie Super Mario 64 hype that was kind of put behind it. So it's actually really nice to see them take another shot at this, and I think really get it right this time. Again, I don't have a point of comparison for the original game, but going through and reading Steam reviews and such and seeing people be like, yes, this is far better than the original game, and just having a lot of fun with it myself, I have to say, I really enjoyed this. Is it on the level of an Astrobot? No, but I would say it's still a perfectly competent collectathon. You kind of jump in, and in place of stars and puzzle pieces, you have pages. And I mean, in every which direction of any level, there are a bajillion pages for you to go out and find in various ways, shapes, and forms, and they're all really fun and whimsical. I really loved just exploring these levels and walking around and just seeing what I could come across, what kind of crazy missions I would find along the way, what missions I would accidentally complete along the way. And I think the game does a really good job with that kind of stuff, as exploring is really rewarding. And these levels are nice and big, much bigger than, your kind of Banjo-Kazooie and Mario 64 levels. And I think it works really well because there is no shortage of stuff to do. But it's also not a perfect game, and this probably comes down to, again, more personal preference than anything. But outside of the excellent first level, the good snow level and the cool space level. The casino and the like swamp jungle didn't really do a whole lot for me, especially visually. They were kind of drab. That was probably my least favorite one. And the casino level, while it does do a good job with the casino theme and like building the level around that and having fun stuff to do there, I don't know, it also just felt kind of lackluster compared to, you know, roaming around the gigantic space level with its sea that you can get the pirate ship upgrade and surf around in, you know, all the different aliens and stuff you fight. And again, I really like the snow world, as it's like basically a water level and a snow level, and it's like really inviting. I don't know, I liked those 3 levels more than the other ones. I think the other 2 are kind of meh. The hub world itself is also pretty cool and has a lot of stuff to do and a lot of pages and stuff to find there, but I also think it's kind of maybe a little too big for its own good, as there were times where I was like, okay, I'm following these signs and they're telling me to go this way to find this thing, and I was just kind of getting lost. But again, maybe that's just my poor sense of direction in video games. That's probably maybe just a B thing. But I enjoyed this. I think it is a competent collectathon 3D platformer. I'm really glad that they got to give this a second shot and do some stuff with it, because it's pretty good. Yeah, I thought I was going to have more to say about this, but I guess I really didn't. Hey, Yooka Replayee, it's really good. Pick it up. I think it's about like $30. I think it's totally worth that. I got about 10 to 12 hours out of this to beat the main game without collecting everything, and there was still a ton of stuff for me to go back and collect. So yeah, that is Yooka Replayee. Moving right along, I have to say it's been a great year for kart racers. Not only did we get a new Mario Kart, but we also got a new Sonic racing game in the form of Sonic Racing Crossworlds. And you know what? All things considered, it's a really, really good game. Now, I unfortunately cannot compare it to the new Mario Kart, as at this point I do not have a Switch 2, therefore I have not played the new Mario Kart, but I did go back and play a good bit of Mario Kart 8 and some of the older Sonic racing games like All-Stars and All-Stars Transformed to kind of give myself a decent point of comparison, and those games are all really fun, and Sonic Racing Crossworlds is no exception. It is also really good. It is exactly what you want out of a kart racer. Getting right into things, you have a good roster of a lot of Sonic characters here. It's definitely more Sonic focused than it is Sega focused, and while I will admit that is a little disappointing, because I did love racing as like Ryu or Zombie or any of the people from Jet Set Radio. I mean, you do have a good roster of Sonic characters. I mean, we got my girl Rouge is in here, Metal Sonic is in here, even like Hector and Charmy B from Knuckles Chaotix make appearances here, and that's awesome. I really like that. And of course, they're constantly adding in more DLC. As I'm recording this, they've just announced that, you know, Nights into Dreams is coming in here. Pac-Man's going to be showing up, obviously Mega Man and SpongeBob, but as it stands right now, you know, it's definitely more Sonic than it is a celebration of Sega. But that's fine. I still think, you know, the roster here is really good and varied. The racing itself feels fantastic. It's very tight. Drifting works very well. It's not loose. You don't feel like you're going to lose control when you're drifting. And then, of course, the game even throws in a good handful of gimmicks. The main one being the Crossworld gimmick. So every second lap of each race, you have either the choice to choose a predetermined stage to go to or a random stage to then go to and race one lap through. And I think that's actually really cool, as it helps vary up each race. It definitely helps with, like, all right, say the main track you're racing on you're not the biggest fan of, well, heck, wait till the second lap and you'll get to go to a whole new level that hopefully you'll like better. Or if you don't like the track you get taken to, hey, guess what? You only have to race one lap around that and you get to go back to your regular track. I think that's done really well, and the predetermined tracks I think are picked pretty well and really help the flow of each race, as it'll either just kind of work perfectly with the original track and kind of keep that vibe going, or it does a really good job of varying up that kind of gameplay of like, oh hey, you're going to immediately jump into like a flying section for this half of this race, and it works really well, or it's going to be like a jet ski section. Also, this game introduces the idea of like rivals, so with each new Grand Prix and each character, you have a rival that has a certain difficulty threshold that you are trying to beat the whole time, and I think that makes for a kind of fun back and forth. You know, even if playing solo, you have somebody to challenge against that isn't just the entire roster, it's somebody in particular. I think that's kind of a neat feature. Of course, I have to talk about the maps themselves. The courses here are really, really good. The first one on the first Grand Prix, which is just called E-Stadium, is like a wonderful send up to like 16-bit Sonic, and it's done in this kind of like almost cyberpunk neon sort of arcadey style where the track looks gorgeous and it's just a blast to play. There's also like some really good tracks like Kronos Island from Sonic Frontiers is one of the tracks here, and it's really, really well done as you kind of start racing around the island, and then halfway through the map, part of it is then kind of like drawn out by one of the bosses you fight in the game, and that's exactly how you fought that boss in that game, is that it would kind of draw a path behind it and you would have to race along it to get it. And I think that it's really neat that they incorporated that into the actual race itself. It's really, really cool. They did a great job with these levels. But of course, there are a good handful of Mario Kart comparisons to be made here. The most obvious being Colorful Mall, which is very clearly just a rip on Coconut Mall. However, they at least made the smart choice of taking one of the best Mario Kart levels and ripping it off and making an equally really, really good Sonic level. So even the stuff here that feels a little too similar to Mario Kart is still really fun and plays just like you'd want it to. But while I do have a lot of good things to say about this game, there are kind of a couple things that rub me the wrong way. Going back to play some of the Sega All-Stars and All-Stars Transformed, those, I like the variety in levels there, as you have like Panzer Dragoon levels, House of the Dead levels, you have like Samba de Amigo levels, which are really cool, and in here you really don't get that celebration of Sega. It's definitely more of a Sonic focused kind of thing, and I wish that they had added in a bit more of that, as it gives a bit more track variety, and yeah, I kind of missed that. I also have to say, I wish there were more tracks in this game. The one thing that this game does, and this goes along with the Crossworld gimmick, is that in each Grand Prix, there's 4 races. The first 3 are original courses, and then the very last one is a single lap on those previous 3 courses you just raced on, which is neat, but again, I think I would have just preferred another brand new track. And then I also kind of want to point out that for as much as I like this game, there's a part of me that can't shake the feeling that this game kind of has a like mobile game aura to it. While it looks good and feels good, it also simultaneously kind of feels cheap and looks cheap in certain ways, and it just feels like a souped up mobile game. Again, I don't want to knock it too much because I still think that this is a very, very solid game. There's just something I can't shake about it that feels kind of cheap, and it really only makes it worse by this game being a full-priced $70 game. This should have been a $50 to $60 game, and especially because the game can basically be beaten in about 3 hours going through all the Grand Prix. I've heard people say that there used to be bigger, more elaborate story modes in the older games. I can't confirm that. I've not played the story modes in those games. If that's true, I would have liked to have seen that here, as that would have at least expanded the story mode, or having a story mode and a Grand Prix rather than just a Grand Prix. So I think that would have been a nice addition and really added to the value of this. But as it stands, I still think this is a fantastic racing game, one of the best kart races this year. I'd highly recommend picking this game up, but maybe wait for it to be a few dollars off. Anyways, that's Sonic Crossworlds Racing. Next up, we have a game that's gotten kind of a bum rep, and you know what? I want to defend it for a little bit here. And that is none other than the Painkiller reboot, which came out to mostly mixed and negative Steam reviews. And honestly, I'm kind of shocked by that. I mean, in some regard, I understand because this is a reboot of a somewhat beloved franchise on the PC, but I think the game that was made here is really good. It is essentially a multiplayer Doom Eternal style game, which I can see would maybe turn off fans of the original series, but as someone with no nostalgia for these games, I think what is here is really good. But I decided to do my due diligence and buy both the original Painkiller and Painkiller Overdose on Good Old Games and give them a try. And I sat down and played about 2 hours of each of those games, and like, they're okay. They're like very standard 2000s arena shooters, very much in the same vein as like a Serious Sam. You know, you have a run, or you have a jump and a shoot button, and you're going to walk into an arena, then they're going to throw a bajillion enemies at you until you kill them all, then you're going to walk into the next room and do the same thing over again. And it's all kind of okay. Like, I'm sure it was fine at the time, But what they made here, which is essentially, you know, like a multiplayer Doom-style shooter, feels like the natural progression of the original Painkiller games, as they've taken what worked in that game and iterated upon it tenfold, making it a far more enjoyable and modern version of that original style. So in the original, where you only had to jump and shoot, in this game you have a slide, you have air dashes, you have jumps, and you can use all of that to string together a lot of really cool movement tech. And it just makes this game so much fun, because you're going to walk into these arenas that are now really well built for this movement you have, and they're going to throw these hordes of enemies at you, and you're going to be able to slide into them or dash into them, which will knock them back or knock them down. And in cases, you can knock them off ledges or knock them into spikes and impale them and kill them. Or you can slide and shoot at the same time, or you can slide and use your special at the same time. And it's really, really fun how they've kind of come here and just taken everything that worked in the original game and just expounded upon it in a beautiful, fun way. The weapons here are, I believe, all classics from this game. You know, you have your double barrel shotgun. You have the namesake, the Painkiller weapon, which is just like a swirling blade of death, which can be used on its own. And again, you can slide around with that thing and just obliterate groups of enemies, or when given the prompt, you can basically use it to glory kill enemies, which I think is really cool. You know, you also have like your stake gun, and you have a RPG, and you have an SMG, and a hand cannon. So you've got a good variety of weapons here. It's not the greatest variety, but what's here is fun, and each weapon also has its skill tree. And that skill tree goes in 4 different directions, which can then be built upon 3 times for like doing a bunch of crazy stuff. Like one of them is you literally shoot out a black hole and it just sucks enemies up into it and kills them all. Like, that's awesome. You also have like an electrical shock beam on one weapon, it'll just literally just shoot out this beam and just obliterate anything in its path. You have like a freeze gun, or like a freeze grenade on your shotgun. Feeding into the combat are the different things you have to do in some of these arenas. So for example, some arenas it's just kill everything. In other ones it's like, hey, here's this item, it's going to have a circular radius around it, kill as many enemies in this radius as you can to fill it with souls, so you can then deliver it to this thing to open up this door, and do that 3 times. Or hey, you're going to escort this like weird creature, kill anything that runs towards it, and also feed it, you know, like these like power-ups to keep it going along. And you have kind of stuff like that, which definitely works a lot better in a multiplayer setting, where you can say, hey, I'm going to need you two to cover me while I take care of this. Whereas playing by yourself, it's like, okay, I have to not only kill a lot of these enemies and thin the horde, I also have to then focus on trying to do this. So I can see that getting kind of annoying in single player mode, but I don't know, I was able to work around it and it worked fine. But on top of that, it also brings over the tarot card system from the original game, where you would have tarot cards you would get that can buff your characters for the next level you're about to do. And in, you know, this case, it's like, hey, energy regenerates faster, or weapons do X amount more damage, or you just now get 50% more health, and whatever it may be. And that's really cool to see that brought over here and used. So it still feels faithful in a way. Now, of course, I can see why people will be mad that this is a multiplayer-only game. While that is technically true, you can play this offline with bots, and doing so for part of my playthrough, I had no problems with it. It was just as fun. And then on the other half, where I got to play with friends, it was even more fun. So really, I don't see why people are so miffed about that. As, again, I think the game here at its core is really fun. On one hand, though, the game is kind of short. You have, you know, these raids you go on, and as it stands right now, you only have 3 main hubs with 3 levels each. So that is a total of 9 levels for a full campaign right now, which is a little short. That should absolutely be expanded upon. I'd love to see them put 3 more hubs in there, give us an additional 9 more levels. Then I think this would feel a lot more complete and have a lot more going for it. Now, it does have kind of like a roguelike mode, where it'll string together these different areas infinitely for you, so you can just kind of do like a run-based mode, which I think is a nice addition, but apparently you don't get rewards from that, which is strange. Oh yeah, there's rewards in this game. On these raids, you collect gold and do stuff. After these raids, you can then spend these souls and this gold to unlock more weapons and unlock the skill tree stuff. So yeah, the Painkiller reboot, I think, is kind of unjustly hated. I get it, people who love this series maybe aren't getting exactly what they wanted from this, but again, this feels like the natural progression of this series in a modern setting. And as someone with no nostalgia for these games, I think this one blows all the old ones out of the water. Like, there's some fun to be had in the old games, but I don't know, they're kind of generic. I think I would still rather play like Serious Sam. This new Painkiller game is really, really good. If you are a fan of Doom and Doom Eternal, you already know what to do. Play this game, pick it up. It is $40, and that's a little steep. I'll admit to that. I think it's a little steep. This probably should have been like a $30 game. But hey, I think this game is pretty good. Pick it up on sale. If you like Doom, you like multiplayer games, you ever want to play a multiplayer Doom, this is one to do it. Alright, and last up, before we get to my top 5 games of the year, we have none other than Shinobi Art of Vengeance. Yes, Sega has brought Shinobi back in the form of a search-action Metroidvania game, and in a world where we get a lot of these, I have to say this is one of the best I've ever played. And it pretty much comes down to just how excellent the movement and combat is, as simply moving your character around is incredibly satisfying. You have jumps, double jumps, air dashes, wall climbing, wall jumps, and stringing all of that together lends itself to some like intense and unique platforming scenarios that always felt good. And even when I found myself falling into pits or spikes, I was pumped to go back and immediately try again. Add to that fast and flashy combat, and what you end up with is almost Doom-like in nature, as like you even have like a glory kill that ends up restoring like health and armor. Of course, you have your light and your heavy attacks, which you can combo together, but simple additions like comboing into an aerial attack and slamming fools down with another slash always hits hard. Not to mention you have plenty of unlockables and moves to keep combos going, and stuff like your Nimbo attacks and full screen specials that charge up over time. And of course you have dodges and parries, but what really ties it all together is just how great the movement and combat flow together. It feels so refined, and once you have it all down, nothing feels better than going into a fight and having like total control of that entire fight from beginning to end. One move in particular that I love is like you start a combo and then you air dash over to the other side of your opponent, slash him again, air dash back over, and it essentially becomes like you volleying your opponent back and forth. And every single time it happened, it never stopped being fun. I've also got to talk about the visuals, as this game looks really, really good, as it kind of takes this mix of like 2D and 3D and kind of ends up having this almost like ancient Japanese hand-painted like style to it that ends up really lending the game some like serious like visual style. And stuff like the cyberpunk level, the decked out fish market, and the beautiful glow of like the Lantern Festival really help this game stand out. But even like the slightly duller levels that you wouldn't really expect to be all that great looking, kind of like the various tech bases, or even the mountain, which kind of starts out as you'd expect and then quickly becomes like this really cool like volcano secret layer. Now I do want to mention that yes, this game does have levels. It isn't like a giant unbroken map like your typical Metroidvania, but the levels themselves are actually pretty big with plenty of stuff to find in them. Though they are more linear than usual, and they do kind of pigeonhole you into going the right direction more times than not, but there's still stuff for you to unlock and go back and find in these levels, like different strong enemy groups, different secrets and items and money and such like that. But you know, there's still stuff to find in these levels, and actually at certain times they require you to go back to some of these levels, as like the fish market as example completely opens up into an almost whole new level upon your second revisit, as you get to find more areas and more bosses. So yeah, Shinobi Art of Vengeance is incredible. You need to check it out. It is incredibly fun, one of the best Metroidvanias I've ever played. It very much reminds me kind of like that Strider reboot from 2014. Like, I really, really love that game. This kind of fills that void with like a touch of Doom in there with the combat and movement. So definitely check out Shinobi Art of Vengeance. It is absolutely worth looking at. It is absolutely worth picking up. It is worth your money. Alright, now we are moving into my top 5 games of the year. Yes, we are finally here at the top 5, and rounding it out at number 5, we have a game that kind of came in late November and just took me by storm, and that is none other than Time Splitters Rewind. Now this might seem like a little bit of a cop-out, as this is technically a fan game and is in early access. It's not quite out yet. But if you saw my episode on E-Star Land pickups earlier in the year, you saw the section where I talked about Time Splitters 2 and my love for the series and my history and nostalgia with the series, and how I kind of got into really playing it again in early 2025. So I was absolutely thrilled to find Time Splitters Rewind show up on a news feed of mine and see that it was in early access and was free to play. But real quick, before I get any deeper into this, Time Splitters Rewind is a complete remake of 1, 2, and Future Perfect from the ground up, entirely done by fans with the blessing of the IP rights holders as long as the game stayed free. And I guess this thing has been in development for like the last 10 years or something like that, and it has finally come to early access, and it has just about everything you could want. It has like 96 characters, like 50 something weapons. It has like 28 playable maps, the first career mode in Time Splitters, a bunch of challenges, and most importantly, local and online multiplayer available right now to play with anybody across the world. And I just lost myself in this game because there's nothing better than getting to re-experience some of your favorite games with even better controls, as this one allows you to play with keyboard and mouse, which is my preferred first-person shooter controls. I just can't tell you how much fun I've had with this game, even just playing against bots or playing online and just getting to re-experience the Time Splitters games with better controls and have even more fun, and to see these classic levels now done in HD and all of these models now done in HD, and they've all kept their kind of original flavor and character to them. Everything looks great. This is very clearly a labor of love on the development team's part, and I cannot thank them enough. This is an excellent game. Like, seriously, the second this came out and I got it to download and booted it up, I did not stop playing this for like a solid 2 weeks straight. I mean, I went through and did just about everything I could in this game. Obviously, deathmatched, team deathmatched, had a ton of fun running around shooting dudes, went into the campaigns and did the campaigns, then decided to get into the challenges and really start banging my head against some of the crazy challenges in this game, like, hey, you have 5 minutes to get 70 kills in this team deathmatch. Oh yeah, all these other teams are 4 people, you have nobody else on your team. Good luck. And just banging my head against that single mission for like a day and a half, and then finally completing it and just be like, yes, oh, I owned these fools. Or stuff, just like trying to play like capture the bag and trying to hold the briefcase for like the whole duration or nearly the whole duration of the time. Or again, just doing death matches where other teams are just stacked against you tenfold. I mean, I loved it. It frustrated me, but I just kept wanting to play because I loved everything about it so much. I love it. I can't, I don't have really much to say other than Time Splitters Rewind came in out of nowhere and blew me away, and I've been absolutely enjoying the hell out of Time Splitters Rewind. But I will admit, it's not perfect. I do wish there was a bit more in here. I'm waiting on a handful of these other levels from Time Splitters 2 in particular to kind of show up on the deathmatch map section. Sometimes you kind of shoot through people, so it's not perfectly dialed in just yet. And, I wish there were maybe a couple more weapons in there, and definitely a handful of other characters could be introduced, but obviously they're very much working on all of that stuff. And as it stands right now in early access, this is absolutely some of the best bang of your buck for the year. If you love Time Splitters, if you love first-person shooters, if you love old-school deathmatching, like, this has got it all covered. Yo, go get Time Splitters Rewind, get online, play with people, have a great time. It's incredible to get to go back and relive some nostalgia with Time Splitters now in 2025, especially since Free Radical got, closed down a handful of years ago when they said they were working on some sort of Time Splitters project, and it just seemed like there was never going to be a future for Time Splitters, and here we have it, something that has come back and reinvigorated the series for the fans and for people like myself who really enjoyed even more this time. That is number 5, Time Splitters Rewind. All right, at number 4, we have Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 3+4 Remaster. This should come as no surprise to anybody that is familiar with this channel, as my love for the Pro Skater series is way up there. I absolutely love these games. They're super nostalgic, and this is a game I have been waiting for since the release of 1+2, as I was really hoping 3 and 4 would get the same treatment, but my excitement was kind of cut short after that, as it was kind of reported that 1+2 did not quite do well enough in the sales department for them to really greenlight a 3+4, but by all means, Tony Hawk, the man himself, got it done, and we ended up getting 3+4, and it's great. It's fantastic. Is it perfect? Not quite, but for the most part, I really, really enjoyed this game. It's kind of hard to say what I love about this game other than it's Tony Hawk Pro Skater. You know exactly what you're getting. Serving up lines and hitting combos and racking up scores and huge points feels just as good as ever, if not even maybe a little better, because you have more moves at your disposal this time than you did in 3 and 4, as this time you have the wall plant, and obviously 4 introduced the spine transfer, so you have a lot of ways to really string your combos together and just keep things going. Stuff like revisiting all-time classic maps and carving out memorable combos at the airport, at Alcatraz, or at Foundries, satisfying as it was all those years ago, and it's safe to say that these levels haven't really lost their luster. It's Tony Hawk's Pro Skater. It plays just like you want it to. It's fantastic. Now, of course, there was a bit of controversy around this game in regards to the Pro Skater 4 campaign and how they have kind of reworked it into the classic 2-minute timer run, and a lot of people were pissed off by that. And to be completely honest, I was all for it. I love Pro Skater 4, but as somebody who went back and played through that game in the lead up to this game's release, Pro Skater 4's career sets a good foundation that Underground 1 built upon tenfold. And I think that Pro Skater 4's campaign has not aged particularly well and kind of feels limited in what it can do. And I think that really comes from my love of the 2-minute timer runs, as you can string together interesting and fun runs and challenging runs of like, hey, I'm going to collect skate while I also do the high scores, or I'm going to collect these 5 objects while I also try and knock off maybe some of these gaps I'm supposed to hit. And I like that kind of challenge of like trying to figure out the best way to route a level. I think that's a lot of fun. And then in Pro Skater 4, you just couldn't do that, as every single goal is dealt out to you one by one by one after another, and it just becomes kind of laborious and tedious, and it really kind of slows down the experience. Come on, how recently have a lot of people played that Pro Skater 4 campaign? A lot of those goals kind of suck. Come on, are you really telling me that skating through the flags down the Kona Snake Run is fun? No, that goal sucks. And there's a lot of goals like that in Pro Skater 4 that suck and are not very fun. So I was very happy to see them retool the career mode in this game and streamline it a bit. You know what? They did a fantastic job doing that, because a lot of the character and the flavor of the Pro Skater 4 campaign is still captured here, as most of these goals are identical to their previous goals, like the big memorable ones are there. Now, I will admit, I will argue a little bit for the other side here, as I do believe that some of the character and kind of the fun elements of these Pro Skater 4 levels do suffer from some of these changes. I think the best example is something like Zoo, where the kind of enjoyment and the craziness of that level really came from the animals being in the zoo and the kind of goals tied around them. Like, you gotta do this thing in the tiger's den, or you've gotta, ollie onto the elephant. And in this game, the level is completely abandoned and it kind of loses its character. Now, in this game's defense, they did at least go in there and gussy it up and put in some more ramps and make it a more competition-friendly level, because it is a competition level in this game, whereas it was not in the original. So, they've kind of, done what they've needed to keep these levels somewhat faithful. But that'll also kind of bring me to the other side of, I think, being faithful to some of these levels kind of hurt them in certain aspects. And let me clarify when I say that, I mean, I think some of these levels could have been expanded upon. Perfect one being like Rio from Pro Skater 3. It is a fun little compact level. I'm all for them keeping the original design and layout there, but maybe expand around that original layout. Make the city bigger, add in more now famous, skate spots in Rio de Janeiro. Same thing for like Kona. Kona is a level that just has a lot of empty space in it, and I get that it's trying to, recreate a real life place, but go ahead and add in, extra ramps, extra things here and there, expand around the level. I think like what comes to mind is the Florida level in Underground, where the kind of Tampa Am is a small portion of that level, as opposed to like Pro Skater 2 times on the Xbox, where the Tampa Am was the full level. And I kind of wish they'd done that in places here. And in some regards, they kind of have. You take like Skater Island, for example, and they've added in the SpongeBob secret area, which is a wonderful little tribute. However, it's like 2 or 3 little ramps. It's a very, very small secret area. I wish they had made it bigger. But yo, let me skate in SpongeBob's neighborhood, dog. Let me skate through Bikini Bottom. Also, real quick, what a weird mishmash of like some of my favorite properties of all time. We have Tony Hawk's Pro Skater that now has the Doom guy in it, the Revenant from Doom in it, SpongeBob references in it. In 2025, I would have never had it on my bingo card that 3 of my favorite properties would all come together in one weird mishmash. Anyways, back to the levels. It is kind of frustrating that instead of adding to these levels, in some cases they've actually taken away from them. And Zoo, again, is the perfect example. There is no longer the kind of like the aquarium secret area in there where you could skate around the giant shark tank or with the skate around like the penguin enclosure. And that's actually really a shame. I always loved that part of the level. It was always fun and memorable, and I don't know why they took it out of here. It's also worth noting that a couple levels from Pro Skater 4 are not present, two in particular being Chicago, which initially was, I believe, built for one of the Matt Hoffman games, so it never quite lent itself super well to the Pro Skater style, but Carnival is missing, and that was always one of my favorite levels in the original Pro Skater 4. I loved all the different set pieces, like the little haunted house secret area. You had the kind of tilt-a-whirl you could skate around. You could skate up and down the roller coaster, and of course you had the little alligator that would come out and eat you if you stood in the swamp. I loved that level. It's a real shame it's not here. Again, I was hoping they would add it in some DLC, but as of this point, that has not happened, so it's kind of a shame to see that gone. But Iron Galaxy has tried to make up for that in a few different ways by adding in some new levels, and I gotta say, these new levels are fantastic. They are super good, and they really make me kind of want to see Iron Galaxy go out there and make a Pro Skater 6, because I think they have the talent to do it. But the three levels we have Movie Studio, which is a competition level, but it's a tight little compact level that I think, kind of like Rio, could have been bigger, but works really well within its smaller confines of there's just endless lines to string together to make these huge, massive combos, plus the backdrop of a movie studio is a great, fun place to skate around. It works really well here. Personally, probably my favorite new level in this game. Then we have the behemoth that is Water Park, which feels so much like a classic Tony Hawk's Pro Skater level. I'm shocked that it isn't. This one is so much fun. It's huge, all these different slides to skate and these different water park attractions to skate. Of course, it has a ton of new goals for you, so you get new experience in the career mode here. And then you kind of have the, secret last level, which is the pinball level, which is not necessarily my favorite, but I love the idea of like, hey, you're gonna skate this gigantic pinball level. And I actually love the like zombie apocalypse theme that this one has, because I think it's a nod to Underground 2. I think it's the New Orleans level that you can like start the apocalypse with, and I assume that that was kind of the inspiration for this. But yeah, the new levels here are really, really good. And of course, with a lot of these new levels, you get new stuff in the career mode, new goals that you've never played before. And speaking of that, once you've 100% completed everything in the career mode, you then get even more pro goals, which again bring back some of the original Pro Skater 4 goals and then add a ton of new goals to all of the Pro Skater 3 levels, so you get even more bang for your buck. I gotta talk about the soundtrack. The soundtrack in this game is phenomenal. I heard a certain guy who likes the Dreamcast say that it sucked, and that guy needs to go touch grass because the soundtrack in this is amazing. We have Waves, we have Alice in Chains, we got Danny Brown, we got King Gizzard and Lizard Wizard, we got Turnstile. I mean, we got so much good music in this game. It's ridiculous. Some people are mad that of 3 and 4, only 10 tracks are split across those two games came back, but they were the important ones. We got Ace of Spades, we got that Body Jar song, we got Mass Appeal by Gangstar. I mean, I would say, the big hits kind of come back. And then you just get a bunch of new and old artists that are still fantastic. Ones that were on those original soundtracks, just they've chosen different songs, which, hey, look, I'm all for it. Plus, if you don't like skating to this soundtrack, go into the Spotify app, load up the Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 3-4 playlist on there, and just play it that way and turn off the music in the game, so you can still skate to the original music if you try hard enough. It's not that difficult. Anyways, Pro Skater 3+4 is an excellent remaster. I've enjoyed it through and through. It's exactly what I wanted from this series, and I'm happy that we got it. Here's hoping we eventually get an Underground remaster. I would absolutely love that. Yeah, number 4 is Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 3+4. Next up at number 3, we have Metal Eden. Now, this one should probably come as no surprise, as this is the only game on this list that I actively went out of my way to review on the channel this year, as I just loved it that much. This is a fantastic movement style shooter that is very much rooted in a marriage of Doom and Titanfall. Doom because of its kind of, punchy shooting and fast movement, but also Titanfall because of some of its more eccentric movement abilities, kind of like wall jumping and wall running, and then like a jetpack to kind of, shoot fools in the air and stuff. It makes for some really, really satisfying and enjoyable movement, tech, and, combat that this game is just absolutely built for. But, Metal Eden is, oh god, it's going to be a pain in the ass to try and describe this story, but it's a very, very heady, a nihilistic kind of cyberpunk, I would say almost like Lynchian story in the way that it's told, but you're essentially a robot named Eve who is able to transfer her conscious to other robots after her death, and she is kind of stuck in this perpetual loop working under this kind of omnipresent creature known as the Nexus, and you're trying to get these cores that all of humanity is kind of stored in, and you're trying to get them back to humanity, as there's been a giant cataclysmic event off of another planet where humanity was kind of trying to rebuild. It's very, very fascinating. It makes for an interesting story that's definitely not for everybody, but it's very much for me. But what really matters here is the gameplay, and this game definitely has that. The kind of main mechanic in this game is called core ripping, and now what you can kind of do is, as you whittle down enemies and take them out, you are able to then rip the cores out of them and use them in a variety of ways. You can throw them back at weaker enemies, kind of like a grenade, or you can basically absorb the core and use it for like a blood punch, which is absolutely needed, as you'll need that blood punch to stagger enemies and down their shields, which will leave them open to attacks. So it's a very kind of risk-reward system of you need to figure out what enemy you're going to core grab, if you're going to use it as a grenade, if you're going to use it to power up. After you've powered up, which enemy is the biggest priority to take care of. And of course, with the jump and the hover jump and the slide and the air shooting, what comes together is just this glorious, acrobatic, fast-paced combat. And these levels are brilliantly built around your play style, so you can really just circle around these rooms and grapple hook and shoot fools, or be hovering and snipe people in the air, or come down and hit them with a blood punch. And then of course you have upgrades along the way. You know, your core rip mechanic, you can't just use it all the time. It does have a cooldown on it. That cooldown can be lowered with certain upgrades, but you also have upgrades that, like, hey, when you throw the core, the grenade is more powerful, enemies drop health upon death, or every time you shatter their shields, you absorb their shield, different stuff like that. And then obviously you have a small arsenal of weapons, which can then also be upgraded and do more damage. And as you get further into the game, you have weapons that can already basically just take down shields and stagger enemies, so you no longer just have to rely on the core ripping mechanic. It's just a really, really fun and compact first-person shooter. That said, you know, it is kind of short. It's an intro level and then 8 levels after that. It's very much dealt out in kind of 3 different sections. You obviously have your combat sections, you have your kind of acrobatic parkour sections where a lot of the story is dealt, and then you kind of have these sort of Metroid Prime inspired sections where you can kind of turn into this morph ball and fend off enemies. And in the game's 5 to 7 hour runtime, it never really wore thin on me. As a matter of fact, I got to the end of the game and was so enthralled with it, I was more than happy to load up a new game immediately and play through it again. And then at the end of that, I started another new game so I could start the review for it. Metal Eden is a fantastic first-person shooter. It's definitely not going to be for everyone because of the core ripping mechanic and the different way it kind of operates and turns the Doom formula on its head, but I myself absolutely loved it. My personal favorite shooter of the year. If you're a fan of Doom Eternal and stuff like that, this is absolutely a must-play. It does go for about $40, which is maybe a little steep, but I got more than my money's worth out of this. Maybe catch it on sale. Anyways, that is number 3, Metal Eden. All right, coming in at number 2, we have a game that genuinely surprised me, and that is none other than Zenless Zone Zero. Now, technically, this game did come out in 2024, but it is a live service game that they are constantly adding more and more stuff to it all the time, and there's been huge updates and improvements this year, so I have no problem putting this high up on my list, because this is a game that, like, by all accounts, is something I would not typically enjoy. Like, for one, it is a free-to-play gacha game, which is not really my thing at all. I feel like my experience with most free-to-play games that aren't like Fortnite is that they all kind of feel like crappy mobile games that have been slightly souped up but are just overall mid. Also, it's from Hoyoverse, and like, I'm not really a Hoyoverse guy. I've never had any interest in playing like Genshin Impact or Honkai Star Rail. And then also, number 3, it's just like an anime-ass anime game. And for as much as I love anime, like stereotypical, just kind of straight up anime games don't really do anything for me. They always kind of just feel like mid RPGs to me, but that is absolutely not the case here. Back in March, in between bigger releases, I kind of found myself with some downtime, and on my PlayStation homepage, Zenless Zone Zero showed up, and I was like, hey, I kind of remember seeing a trailer for this at one of the Game Awards, and I thought it looked relatively interesting. I liked its kind of Y2K futurism look to it, so I decided I would give it a shot, and hey, it's free, so if I didn't like it, I could just go and uninstall it, and against all odds, I absolutely fell in love with this game. and could not put it down. I'm not kidding, like the first 2 weeks I played this game, every waking second that I was not at work or spending time with my wife, I spent playing this game and I could not stop. It was so much fun. So the setup here for Zenless Zone Zero is that you play as a set of twins who run a video store that is essentially a front for their proxy business, and proxies are basically people for hire who will go on missions for you inside of this place called the Hollow. Now, the Hollow is this sort of subspace dimension that is kind of illegal to go into, but also like very dangerous as it's poisonous to humans and is full of monsters, but that hasn't kept like shady individuals, gangs, corrupt politicians, and more from like conducting nefarious business deals, using it for illegal trade routes, and other such activities. Thankfully, you aren't really a part of that. You actually use it for good and like help people recover like stolen goods, find lost trinkets, even find lost people, and various other well-intentioned deeds. And on your missions into the Hollow, you get to take 3 Hollow Raiders with you, and these end up acting as your fighters. And what follows is genuinely some of the best third-person combat I've ever experienced. Seriously, the arcadey combat loop is so fun and is exactly what I've been craving from all of these like third-person action games and Souls-likes we've been getting for the last handful of years. This is just like everything I wanted and more. Very, very much rooted in a kind of like Devil May Cry action arcadey style, and I absolutely love it. Every encounter has this like perfect, fast and frenetic flow to it that is just like pleasingly snappy and kinetic, in just the same ways that like a good movement shooter like Doom is. And again, it kind of just like tickles that right part of my brain. And what really makes it work is that the combat system has just the right amount of depth. You know, it's not too simple, but it's simple enough to pick up and play, and it's not too extra to where you can't learn it all. And once you've got a grip on all of the mechanics, you can walk into an encounter and be in total control of it from start to finish, absolutely wiping the floors with fools. Obviously, you have your light attacks and your heavy attacks, which you can string together, but as you fight, you have like multiple meters that build up. So a standard combo can be ended with a special, and if that staggers the enemy, that'll launch you into a chain attack, which combos into your next character for a follow-up attack, and if that does enough stagger, you can launch into your third character for even more attack, which will launch you back into your first character for a full chain combo for maximum damage. And if by the end of that your EX special is full, you can launch into that to keep the combo going. But wait, there's more. You also have like dodge counters and parries that can both be used in conjunction with your attacks that can be comboed back into your chain attacks to keep an almost like never-ending flow of offense. And it never stopped feeling amazing. It's like a shot of adrenaline every time you take control and walk out almost completely untouched. And that alone has kept me coming back to this game for months. But what also kind of keeps things fresh is that you like unlock more characters, and you can kind of mix and match them and create these new teams to kind of figure out which characters you like with other characters, as everybody plays slightly differently from the rest, and it's really fun to experiment and find out which characters fit the playstyle you like best. Not to mention the game also has like a ton of story for each character, and like if I'm being honest, I'm not super big into the stories here or anything, but like every single character has their own story arc, their own in-depth like backstory and just story mode, so there's plenty of that for anybody who really gets into these characters. And I will admit, you know, it's all done really stylishly, as a lot of the cutscenes are all voice acted, and some of them are done in this kind of like comic book style, while others are done completely in engine and still look really good. But this is a gacha game, so it does end up with the predatory microtransactions, season passes, and intentional finite resources given out via like dailies and weeklies and monthly tasks. I gotta say, like, the worst offender is the gacha system to unlock new characters, and while you do have plenty of opportunity to get polychrome, which is what you use to spend on these characters, it never really ends up feeling like enough. And you also still have the chance to not get the character you're pulling for, as you have a 50-50 chance every single time. So it can be kind of frustrating. Also, especially since each character has a ton of different stats to upgrade that all cost these different finite resources. Like, you have your character level, you have like your 6 main stats that all can be upgraded 12 levels. You then have like these 6 cores, and then you have your W engine, which also needs to be pulled with polychrome from the gacha system. So once you've then spent the polychrome to get that, each one of these W engines has 6 different slots on it for different discs that all then need to be acquired, and each of these discs have at max 15 levels to be upgraded. Honestly, all that's like pretty overwhelming, and it takes a long time to upgrade all of these, even with like the daily charges you're given to grind for these materials. But besides combat and grinding, there are also various other ways to spend your time and get materials, like taking on missions from the internet, which are the things you're then hired for, completing story mode goals, and then of course these different things you do throughout the game can also kind of vary up the gameplay a bit with like different mini games. So it's not just like action combat all the time. Sometimes there's like little puzzle modes in there. There's kind of like some RPG style combat on there, maybe some kind of like almost like action chess kind of stuff where you kind of move pieces around, and as you move those pieces you then have to stop and do battles, but they do enough to try and shake things up. So yeah, Zenless Zone Zero easily makes it at number 2 on my list, as it is definitely the game I played the most this year with like over 150 hours at this point. And 9 months later, I still find myself loading it up once or twice a week to check in and do stuff and just get a dose of that combat. I highly recommend this game, especially since it's something like I never thought I would enjoy this, but once I got a hold of it, it just had a grip on me. And again, like I'm not really big on the whole Gooner gotcha game thing, but this game genuinely won me over with like its incredible combat loop. I just couldn't get enough of it. So even if it doesn't seem like your thing, I highly recommend giving Zenless Zone Zero a shot. It's free, so no harm, no foul if you don't like it. Yeah, number 2, Zenless Zone Zero. And finally, at number 1, my favorite game of the year. It is none other than the game that took the whole world by storm, and deservedly so, Clair Obscur Expedition 33. I mean, where do I even begin? This is genuinely one of the best RPGs I've ever played. And you know what? I'm not like the biggest fan of RPGs, y'all kind of know this, but this just nails everything. The story, the characters, the combat, it all truly shines, making for an unforgettable experience that, like, when I played it the day after launch, I just kind of knew that there was going to be nothing better that I was going to play for the rest of the year. And as I got further and further into this game, it just continued to prove that, yeah, nothing else was going to top this. So Expedition 33 takes place in a world overseen by this kind of godlike deity known as the Paintress, and every year she's awoken and subtracts a number from her monolith, and everybody that is older than that number dies, and this is known as the Gamage. And the day after the Gamage, everybody who is now the age of that number on the monolith gets put as a part of the next expedition to the mainland to try and defeat the Paintress. And this time, it is Expedition 33, hence the name. But as your crew sets sail and makes it to the mainland, they are met by an old man, someone who should definitely not be alive. And this old man slaughters your entire crew in seconds, leaving you and just a few others to kind of go on and uncover what mysteries the mainland holds and try to overcome the incredible odds and defeat the Paintress. It's an incredible story setup that truly goes some unexpected places, and the cast of characters you end up with all have certain depth and like humanity to them that I feel like is so rarely captured in most games. Like truly these characters really feel real, which really goes to some interesting places as you play this game and plays off of that realness and that emotion that comes along with it. But that is more going to be saved for the spoiler section of this video. But yeah, the kind of humanity captured here, as like your characters have different reasons for going on these expeditions. As a matter of fact, like the one you play as, Gustav, has very different reasons than Mael going on the expedition, as Gustav watches his one true love within like the first 15 minutes of this game die in his arms at the fate of the Gamage, and it is just absolutely heartbreaking, and you barely know these characters at this point. Whereas Mael kind of feels like she has no purpose in life, and kind of, despite being young enough to not need to go on the expedition, feels as though maybe she should just go anyways. So it really sets up these different stakes for all of your different characters as you get to know them and love them. But aside from the story, the real star of the show here is of course the incredible combat that mixes turn-based RPG mechanics with like real-time dodges and parries and counters, making for genuinely one of the most engaging and fun combat systems I've ever experienced. It was so fun to figure out all of the different like parry timings for the different monsters that this is maybe the only RPG where I was actively wanting to spend more time in combat. But of course, what makes the combat so special is how each character has their own play style that then plays off of everyone else, and finally having that like aha moment where you're figuring out how to string them all together into like one well-oiled combat machine was incredibly gratifying. And like the perfect example is somebody like Mael, who is like a stance character. She has different stances that do different things. So in defense mode, obviously her defense is buffed, but her attack isn't, where she also has something like Virtuoso stance, where her attack is 200 times more powerful. So once I kind of locked in and figured out how to work everybody together, I would have Lune burn all the enemies on the field, so Mael could use a move that would put her in her Virtuoso stance on the next turn if the enemy she attacked was burning. So then the next turn she can hit it with her like crazy super ultra mega death combo, and it would do 200 times damage on every single hit and just wreck whatever was on the field. Add to that Luminas and Pictos, which are like these various abilities that can be found throughout your adventure, and what you have is an incredible amount of customization that lends itself to some like crazy min-max builds of every character, and all of these can basically completely reshape all combat scenarios. For example, to use your special attacks, you need attack points, which are typically earned by like successful dodges and parries. But how about a Picto that gives you 1 attack point at the start of every battle? Or even better, how about 1 at the start of every turn? Or how about a Picto that gives you 200 times attack all the time, but comes at the cost of you being at 1 health at all times? So if like you're a parry god, you can pretty much be a complete glass cannon. There are even perks like attacking twice each turn, and then if you combine that with the Picto that fully heals you if you take no damage on your last turn, then you pretty much have an infinite health build, as you will take 1 turn, take no damage, then do an immediate another turn after that. You're good to go. It's crazy how like all of the different builds you could do in this game. And the best part is that you can equip these Pictos, which all have various different stat buffs to them, like, hey, this adds more health, this adds more to attack, this adds more to X, Y, and Z. But then if you complete 4 battles with these equipped, now your whole party can learn them if you have enough Lumina points. So like by the end of the game, I had every single character earning 1 attack point at the start of every turn. 2 of them had like a second chance perk where if I died, they would immediately respawn with full life, full everything, and get to have another shot. There's also tons of other perks like, hey, if you attack this character that's burning or this character that's stunned, you get health back every time. Perks aside, you also have like gradient attacks that build up and do massive damage. You have plenty of like defense spells that can like buff single characters or even the whole party at certain levels. And of course, the crucial parry mechanic, which if you successfully pull off a string of parries, you'll send a powerful counterattack right back at your foe, and hitting this always felt amazing. I also love the world of Clair Obscur. The game is straight up beautiful. It has this sort of like Victorian dark fantasy style to it, and I've heard some people complain that this looks like an Xbox 360 game, but those people need to go touch grass. This game looks fucking beautiful. Like seriously, it's gorgeous. Literally one of the first places you go is called the Flying Waters, and it's like this stunning water biome where you walk in and you're at the bottom of this giant luminescent like coral reef as all of these massive sea creatures swim by you, and it like genuinely blew me away the first time I saw it. There's also like Visage Island, which is like an island made of rock formations that all look like faces, hence the name. And of course, all the enemies look great and the bosses are really visually interesting. Seriously, this game's style carries it a long way. But again, I want to loop back to the story because of the themes and concepts it tackles and the twists it throws at you really leave like a lasting impact. So at this point on, I want to talk about spoilers. So if you've not played Clair Obscur Expedition 33, you need to go do so immediately. This is genuinely one of the greatest RPGs I've ever played. It might even be one of the greatest games I've ever played. Truly a generational title, so go play it. Alright, if you're sticking around, I'm going to be going straight into spoilers here, and I have to say, this game gets really heavy as the realization about 1/3 through the game when Gustav dies and you realize that this actually hasn't been his story. It's been Mael's and Verso's story. And then the sudden shock of coming out of the painter's fight, thinking that was the final boss, and you know, you'd finally saved everybody, and your whole party goes back to Lumiere, and then the entire world gets gommaged, and it's just you and Verso left. It just absolutely like tore my heart out of like, oh my god, what have we done? And you get hit with the like cruel twist that the paintress is actually your mom, who's lost her son and can't get over that grief and has created this painting which she has turned into a world, and she is now inside of it. And the idea that the gommage wasn't her taking sacrifices but was actually her saving everybody that she could really just kind of recontextualizes everything you've done up into the game this point. Kind of makes you feel like what you've been fighting for has meant nothing. Not to mention Mael slowly falling into the same pit trap as her mom by not facing her reality and keeping the soul of her brother Verso trapped in this painting rather than her and her family finally coming to grips with his death and healthily moving on and learning to cope with it in the real world. But at the same time, there's this sense of guilt of like, well, why should I destroy this painting? These people inside the painting have lives, loved ones, families, emotions, and experiences that are like just as real as the world outside of it. And at the end of the game, you're given the choice to either stay inside the painting and keep living your ideal life at the expense of your brother's restless soul, or you can finally destroy the painting and the world inside of it to finally let your brother rest and have your family come together and finally move on and deal with your brother's passing. It's a really, really crazy story of loss and denial and emotional coping mechanisms that like genuinely made me cry when I played this game. It's an emotional roller coaster. I would put this story up there in the highest of regards with something like the original Silent Hill 2 story. It's genuinely, I think, one of the best I've ever encountered. And it's incredible stories like these that truly elevate certain video games like this and, Silent Hill 2 for me. And then along with it is obviously, the characters and innovative and addictive combat that I genuinely think this game will be talked about for generations to come. And in the span of less than a year, we've seen so many people, myself included, walk away from this game with such a profound impression of it that, Clair, Obscur, Expedition 33 is without a doubt my game of the year. So if you have not played Clair, Obscur, Expedition 33, do yourself a favor, pick up a copy of it. It is truly an amazing game, well worth all of the hype and praise and awards it's been given this year. As again, like I said, back in like April, May, whenever this came out, I played it the day after it launched. And within about an hour, 2-3 hours, I knew that it was in fact the best game I had played all year, and nothing came close to it. So yes, my game of the year is Expedition 33. Go play it, go check it out. Anyways, that's going to do it for this huge, massive, long, way too long video for my games of the year this year. Anyways, thank you all for watching, and I will see you all in 2026. Hey, thanks for watching. If you like this episode, consider checking out these other videos right here, or even subscribing. Also, if you'd like to throw me a couple of bucks, you can support the show on Patreon.